So there's a debate going on Twitter. Well, not really a debate. Let's call it an argument between doctors and private blood testing companies. And it's really making me crazy because it's not a debate because both sides are just shouting at each other. They don't realize that, well, each side thinks they're right and the other side's wrong. But the reality is they're both a bit right and they're both a bit wrong. Private blood testing and medical tests and individuals taking their health into their own hands, that is a genie that is out the bottle and it's not going back in, right? So as a doctor, you can disagree with that as much as you like, but you can't change that fact. That's coming. On the other hand, if you look on average, the individual person isn't qualified to know anything about their health. But the reality is that nobody is happy with average anymore. Because average healthcare is fine if you fall inside the average, but it doesn't help you if you fall outside the average. And this is why people are taking their health into their own hands. So I see both sides. I see like, if you're not medically trained, on average, you should not be doing anything with medicine and your own health. But the reality is there's a lot of people that fall outside the average that will take charge of their own health. And we have so many examples of where that's already happened that it makes me angry that doctors don't acknowledge this. And it's just the ego of the medical profession, not just doctors and GPs, but everybody in medicine. And I've experienced this multiple times over many years. So as an investor, as somebody who does take care of their own health, I've spoken to a number of doctors, and the thing that comes across is like, we are the only people that can ever do anything about health, and anything new that comes in is bad. Right? Like there's just this wall that comes down, bam. And it's ego. It's just ego. The doctors, the medical professions have not realized that medicine and health has moved on. It's not like it was 20 years ago. The internet has arrived. Doctors are not the only people with information. The internet has opened up and provided information to the average person. But the doctors have not, just not woken up to that fact. Their ego will not allow them to allow anything else into people's health other than the doctor. And that, I would say, is 100% correct for 20 years ago. But it's not correct today. There is more. Where we're going in the future with health is personalized medicine and people taking charge of their own health. And in the future, the doctor is just going to be one input into your own health. That is culturally heresy. Like doctors don't want that. Doctors think that's a terrible idea. But it doesn't matter what they think because that's going to be what happens. There are many, many examples of that. So if I look at like my own health, years ago I just kept getting headaches, just kept going to the doctor. All they do is give me pills, take these headache pills, but it didn't help. And eventually I got so desperate, I went to a private doctor who happened to be a South African doctor, but here in London. And he looked at me, did a whole lot of tests, and just went, dude, you're completely fine. There's nothing wrong with you. What you need to do is to do some exercise. And he was completely right. So I had like knots in my back, which restricted the flow of blood through my neck up to my head, which is giving me headaches. And if I run twice a week, I don't get headaches because that solves the knots, right? But if I hadn't paid to go to this private doctor, my GPs would just still be feeding me headache tablets, right? I was completely failed by my GPs there. A few years later, I had a pain in my side, and I was going to the doctor, and just like every time I lie down at night, my side hurts. I don't understand what's going on. The doctors just kept feeding me pills. They sent me for blood test after blood test, sent me for scans, loads and loads of stuff. Nothing worked. They didn't understand anything that was going on. They couldn't understand the problem, and they certainly couldn't solve the problem. And I happened to start dating a Russian girl, and I told her, and she was like, "Oh, it's this." Da, 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 da. Apparently, what I had is so common in Russia that they have a nursery rhyme for it, for what to do if you get this. And it's basically like, don't eat pastry, don't eat anything that's fried. Like basically I was eating crap, and that was making my side hurt. And it's just such an obvious thing that it's so big in a country like Russia that they have a nursery rhyme for it. Yet no NHS doctor I went to had the faintest goddamn idea of what was going on, right? So I just cleaned up my eating, that pain went away, no problem. So I have very specific examples where I went to the doctor as the expert and they failed me. Now, that's not true on average. Most of the time when I go to my GP, they're great. They sort me out as they do for most people on average. But there's definitely times where the ego of the medical profession doesn't match what they can actually achieve, right? If I look at other examples, so I used to work for Antidote.me, they were previously called Trial Reach, which was helping people take charge of their own health. So if you had something serious, like you had type 1 diabetes or breast cancer or bowel cancer, and you wanted to get on a medical trial that could maybe save your life, that was impossibly hard, because medical trial information was this like huge mass of medical data that a doctor would write for another doctor. And individuals just had no idea, a normal man in the street could not read that stuff. So with Antidote.me, the whole idea was to rewrite that so normal people could read it, and then normal people could say, oh, okay, maybe this trial is right for me, and then they could go speak to their doctor about that trial, right? And Antidote.me that's like 10 years old. And that's just like part of how medical trials are run now, by people being educated in their own illness and taking charge, even though in this case it's through the doctor, but they're taking charge of their medical health. And when you speak to those people, so I did a lot of marketing to those people. And if you go into these communities of people who have a specific illness, they are massively educated about their specific illness, right? And to me, it's ludicrous to assume that a GP who maybe learnt, about bowel cancer 20 years ago at medical school and has an experience just from their practice, but maybe hasn't upgraded their knowledge much on that they would know so much more than thousands of people with this illness, all networked together, learning from each other, right? The way doctors would talk is that GP would know everything, and there's thousands of people with this illness would know nothing, and they must just shut up and go away. And that's just really not the case. There's no room for people to be involved in their own health in the way that doctors look, right? And that's just a block of their own ego. It's a refusal to see, not even to see the future, but to see what is here now, right? So if you look at athletes take care of their own health. They will go and do blood tests. They will go and do crazy stuff. If you look at like mixed martial arts fighters, what they do to recover from injuries is like on the forefront of medicine, in really dodgy, crazy areas of the world, doing stuff that on average you definitely shouldn't do, but they are doing it. That genie is not going back into the bottle. And I think until doctors can accept that the future, once you open information to people through things like the internet, once we get to the point of personalized health, people are just going to take control of their own health when the medical system fails them. And you cannot have an ego that says, oh, we are amazing as doctors and we never fail anybody, because every doctor knows that's not true. Everybody in medicine everywhere knows that's not true, right? The genie is not going back in the bottle. So having both sides of this argument just shout at each other and say, you're wrong, it's just nonsense, because both sides have a point, right? Both sides, there is support for both sides here. So doctors, man, just open your eyes to what's coming, because being on board would be a lot better than just saying no, 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 and closing your eyes and sticking your head in the sand all the time.